What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. What is going on? Thursday night football. Well, we had a Thursday game last week, but this is Amazon Prime, Dolphins, Bills. Pretty good one. And obviously, these Thursday night games have gotten a lot better over the years with the influx of Bezos. So, want to dive into Bills, Miami, which in theory is a rivalry, right? These are two of the better teams the last couple years in the AFC. But it doesn't look like a rivalry on paper when you break down who's winning and losing these things. The Packers are doing something that I think is a little crazy and has a chance to cost them, for the long haul, with Jordan Love having the knee injury and being out, a timeline that we're not sure. I mean, how many games he's going to miss? Can they afford to roll out the quarterback they're rolling out? And then I wanted to dive into a couple football things. Ratings were up, something on the Manningcast, which was down, but I think it's pretty clear why. And I'll just use myself as an example. But a lot going on football-wise. We got a good Sunday night game. Stuckey will be on tomorrow, and we'll be picking games. And I like the slate this week from a gambling perspective. Your boy did okay last week. The Jags, props to Miami, and we'll dive into it all. But that'll be the game plan for today. So before we dive into some football, I got to tell you about my friends, my partners in the official ticketing app of this little old podcast. Because Gametime, they got you covered. Any event you want to go to. Concerts, comedy shows, football games. Who doesn't love going to a football game? Tailgate, enjoy yourself. You have some beers, especially those of you that want to go to a college game. Any event around the country, you name it, college game, look it up, the venue, the team. You can pick by price point. You can pick where you want to sit. It does not get any easier because you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Buffalo and Miami. Tua Tagovailoa versus Josh Allen. Mike McDaniel, offensive coach. Sean McDermott, defensive coach. It's a good matchup. This is really enjoyable. I'm very excited for Thursday night football. It wasn't that many years ago where half the games were like, I got to do this for work. This is one where whether I did this for a living or not, I could be selling insurance or digging ditches. I would be locked into the couch for this one. And big picture wise, last week, those were two gritty wins. Week 1 is weird. Playing the Arizona Cardinals, Kyler Murray running around, not an easy opponent. I think they're going to be feisty all year long. I mean, the Rams right now are pretty banged up. That's not an easy opponent with the Cardinals, their home opener this Sunday. But both teams, the Dolphins were down 17-7. The Bills were down 17-3. It's week 1. All of a sudden you look around, like, coaches say this all the time, and it sounds cliche, but it is true. Like, every year you start fresh. So just because you've been going to the playoffs, you've had winning records, it doesn't mean shit when the next season starts. The stats speak for themselves. Every year we get a ton of turnover in the playoffs. Even though this year when you looked, you're like, I don't know if there's going to be that much turnover. Like the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Niners, the Lions, the Eagles, the Cowboys, the Bills. Like, I think it's kind of going to be the same cast of characters. And I still believe that after week 1. But like, it's not inconceivable to drop a weird game early in the season. And it was on the table for both those two teams. And the Dolphins, who one of my big question marks for them this season, why I thought they would come back to earth, defense. They got a huge stop on 4th down when Doug, I don't know why he went for it. They had a huge play when they were down 17-7 to force ETN, a fumble that went out of the end zone. And obviously they came storming back. And Waddle and Hill, Hill's, I'll say it every single time I ever talk about him, is one of the best football players I've ever seen. And Waddle is a fantastic number 2 wide receiver. They combined for 12 catches, 240 yards, and obviously Tyreek's touchdown. I mean, they're hell to deal with.
And Tua has a very, very good cohesion with those two guys when it's sunny and warm out. And right now, when you're playing in Miami, beautiful weather. And the Bills, like a lot of question marks. What offensive pieces are they going to rely on? They're clearly more comfortable running the ball last year down the stretch, and even in that game on Sunday against the Cards, obviously Josh is one of the more dynamic players we've ever seen from ability to pass and run the football. Found a way to come flying back. Wasn't easy. I had a couple buddies texting me like, should I hammer them live money line? They were an underdog when it looked pretty bleak. I'm like, yeah. And then boom, they rattle off a couple touchdowns and the rest is history. But I think when you look at this game, right? I mean, the Dolphins, since Mike has been there, they've been back-to-back playoff games. Now, they've lost them both, but they're a franchise a lot like the Bills before Josh and Sean McDermott showed up. Kind of were irrelevant most of the 2000s and 2010s, especially the Bills. I mean, they were mainly terrible. The Dolphins had the Wildcat season. But this game, since Josh has become the starter, they're 11-2 versus the Miami Dolphins. Like, they haven't just, this hasn't been, we have your number. Like, we've owned you. 11-2 as the starter against the Miami Dolphins. So I do think there's some pressure on the Dolphins. It's at home. Now, a short week to me, especially in September, but the first true Thursday night game, right? Because even the Chiefs and the Ravens, that wasn't a true Thursday night game. They got to cut down their roster. They had more time to prepare. This is, you play on Sunday and then you play again on Thursday. It's impossible to be any more fresh than a Thursday night game than week 2. So not many excuses for the Dolphins. I do think, like, if you're not going to beat them now, when are you going to beat them? Right? They don't play the Bills in crazy potential weather because the game is the first weekend. It's like 11-3. So it's not even a week into November, the way the calendar sets. So it could be a weather game, but it also could be not that bad. Because if you told me that game was like in the middle of December, I'd be like, that's a lock, Bills win. But like, this is a team that is talked about, and Mike McDaniel talked about this offseason, like finishing. When are you going to get these guys? Now, you guys know where I stand. The Bills were an auto division winner, like without hesitation. Honestly, them and the Chiefs are the easiest, just like auto locks. And it's going to be that way until they prove otherwise. I think you're just insane. I think I would have agreement. It's why it was so crazy from the betting market that the Jets were favored. And everyone, I read some of the YouTube comments. People were like, Middlekauff, you're overreacting to the Jets, their schedule. Like, I don't think the Jets are good enough and have enough history and their coach has proven anything just to make them lock wins regardless who they're playing. Like, yeah, in theory, should they beat the Patriots or the Titans? Sure. But, like, you don't get the treatment as a really good team. If you tell me the Dolphins are playing the Titans this week, yeah, I like the Dolphins. Obviously, if the Bills are playing the Patriots this week, like, yeah, I like the Bills. But I'm not just like auto win for the Jets. Not saying they won't win, but they have proven nothing. Nothing. So this is the cream of the division because of their history, because of their coaching. Like, that's the thing with the Jets. And again, I'm pro Robert Saleh. Love my bald guys. But, like, I don't know. Like, I think Mike McDaniel is a tad bit overrated given that he's never won a big game. And this, it's weird. Like, can you have a big game in week 2? For most teams, you can't. But given this is a divisional opponent and a team that you have to beat to win the division, like, you have to go through Buffalo, like, yeah, this is a pretty big game. And to me, the pressure's on Miami. But like I said, that was a gritty win last week. That was a game, like, I bet on the Jags. And when you're watching that game, I thought it was in my back pocket. And they showed a little heart. They showed a little fight. Now, this is a different level. Again, 11-2 in the Josh Allen era. The weather's not going to get any better than this situation. So I like the Bills in this spot, just based on history, based on I like the Bills more. But this is a big spot for Miami. And if you're a Miami fan, I think you would agree. Like, can we beat these guys? Can this happen right now, please? Like, can we take advantage of this situation? We're at home. So the Bills have to travel on the short week. Like, they're the ones getting in a plane on Wednesday afternoon to fly down here. So I'm excited. I really am. There's some props kind of like Josh Allen and Tua both to have good games. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Touchdowns, TD, Tutty, take it into the house, in for 6. I like to call it a tug. Whatever you call touchdown, one thing's for sure. Touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. On the ground, in the air, special teams or defense, we do not care how you score them. We just want to bet touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first NFL bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your bet today. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? I know I do it all the time. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets instantly and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month NFL Plus Premium. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. The Packers. There's nothing you can do when your quarterback gets injured. That's nobody's fault. Well, it might be because the field was atrocious, but he gets caught between two guys. His knee pops. Obviously, they're very, very lucky that he avoided an ACL injury. Sometimes you just get lucky, right? I saw Rome Odunze said he heard like a pop in his knee, and even Eberflus is like, yeah, we feel very fortunate that it wasn't something serious. And he's even up in the air for this week, like still could play, which if I was a betting man, I would imagine Rome does not play. But even Rome's like, I've never even hurt my knee. Then all of a sudden I look down or I hear something, I feel funny, and I try to play through it, and like something's off. And he sprained his MCL. And there's a big difference between spraining your MCL and giving it a couple of weeks to rehab than tearing your ACL and being out for the season. So they avoided disaster, whether he misses 3 games or 6 games. In theory, it's not the end of the world because he's not missing the season. But this was a team that had big-time playoff aspirations. And let's face it, like, wasn't thrilled with what we saw with their defense last week. But it's only week 1. Like, it's about peaking at the right time. That if you told me Jordan Love was just healthy, I wouldn't just write them off. But you can lose a spot in the playoffs right now. And it almost happened years ago with the Packers when Aaron Rodgers, broke his collarbone and missed a bunch of time, and they barely kept afloat. And then he came back and they made a little run in the playoffs. I think they ended up losing to Atlanta in the NFC Championship game. But to start Malik Willis, and I understand that they traded for him right at the end of training camp, I think that's insane. I really do. This is a guy that I'm all for, and I was pro Malik Willis coming out of college because I like projects with a lot of physical tools. But the overwhelming majority of those guys, whether you draft them in the first round or the third round, don't hit because of how difficult the quarterback position is. Like talking about the Bills in Miami, to read defenses, to be comfortable in the pocket, to be accurate. Like, listen, we can nitpick Tua all we want. He plays a different sport than Malik Willis. And this guy's barely played. I mean, his rookie season, they tried to throw him out there, and they basically just found Josh Dobbs on the street and started him immediately because Vrabel's like, we can't do this. This can't happen. And I love the Colts this week simply because I don't think you can win a game with Malik Willis, no matter how much talent you have on offense. And they have a lot. But LaFleur, who I've said before has been really impressive in his tenure in Green Bay, last year was an eye-opening season for the guy. And I get just because you draft a guy or you have him on your roster like they did with Clifford and I forget the other guy's name. I think they drafted late in the draft last year from Tulane that they cut. If you don't like him, you don't like him. But I don't think a team, like they lost week 1. So all of a sudden you lose the Colts. You find yourself behind the 8 ball. And next week you go on the road to Tennessee. Then you play the Vikings and the Rams. So if Jordan Love doesn't play in that period of time, you could find yourself, 1-5 pretty quick. Or I guess 1-4, depending on what happens this week. And I think that's really risky because it's really hard to dig yourself out of a hole. And then all of a sudden, the second half of the season, you have no margin for error. Like if you have an 8-game stretch, you might be forced, if you're way under 500, to go like 7-1 to give yourself an opportunity to go 9-8 or 10-7 and get that 6 or 7 seed. And It's not easy. One thing I do not miss about the NFL is when you have a serious injury to a legitimate player, it is difficult to plug that hole. And clearly, no hole is harder to plug than quarterback, especially when you have a lot of question marks with your backup quarterback, which clearly they had. They didn't like any of the guys in the preseason. And to trade for Malik Willis and then to potentially roll him out, it'd be one thing if Malik, like you had traded for him around the draft and he had been on your team during OTAs and training camp and you felt comfortable. He's kind of just showed up. I think this is crazy, man. Now, it's the NFL. He's awful. They could easily pivot. I know there were conversations. Same agent as Gutekunst. Could they sign Ryan Tannehill? Not like that is, the end all be all that's going to save your season. And who knows, in terms of his training, where he's at. But I'd take Ryan Tannehill right off the couch, just like the Browns did last year with Joe Flacco right off the couch, any day of the week and 50 times on a Sunday over rolling this guy out, which history would show us this type of situation is usually pretty ugly. So very, very risky spot for the Packers. And depending on Jordan Love's injury status, this thing can get ugly and this thing can get ugly fast. Part of why I was disappointed in Tom Brady, even though it was week one, I'm not saying the guy's career is going to suck, is because part of just turning on a game when there's a famous announcer, just announcer in general, the analyst, you kind of get to hang out with him. It's like, I'm going to get 3.5 hours watching the Cowboy game with Tom Brady, and it didn't really materialize that way. I remember years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, whenever they started the Manningcast, the Monday Night Football crew was so terrible. It was unwatchable. They had lost Gruden to the Raiders, and they couldn't figure out the booth. And it was bad. I mean, it was really, really bad. It was tough to watch. And I like Louis Riddick. I work with Louis Riddick, consider him a friend. Just the cohesion, and that was toward the end. Remember, it was Booger, Jason Witten. It was a hard watch. So it was easy to go to Peyton and Eli, and they would have on all these famous guests, and it was just fun. It was a much easier experience. You're like, wait, I just get to hang out with Peyton and Eli in these garages of these mansions of them just in jeans and a pullover shooting the shit. And then all of a sudden, like Patrick Mahomes or Kevin Hart or whoever, even though their audio was a little off with the guest, it was fun. And it was such an upgrade from the actual broadcast of Monday Night Football. Well, then ESPN clearly felt a lot of pressure, right? So they give Troy Aikman and Joe Buck, I don't even know the combined, it was like $150 million. They gave those two guys a ton of money and they stole them from Fox. And I remember last year, whether I cared about the game or not, obviously I watch every Monday Night Football game. It's like, yeah, this thing feels big again, like it did with Tirico and Gruden. It feels like a must-watch situation. It feels like a prime-time game. And I stopped going to Peyton and Eli, even though I loved hanging out with them. And I saw today a report that the broadcast is down 42%. Now, ultimately, it is a separate broadcast that's almost like an extra. So I don't know if they're living and dying with the numbers to begin with. But I think you're going to see this thing go down and down, partly because Joe and Troy are big time. They have been doing the biggest games for what feels like 2 decades. They're a Super Bowl level crew. Not level crew. They are a Super Bowl crew. Like they call Super Bowls. So when I'm watching Jets, 49ers, it doesn't even enter my head to go to Peyton and Eli. And one big thing they got this year is Belichick's going to join them for every broadcast. Well, a couple years ago, when you don't get much Bill Belichick, that's a no-brainer. Like, what's Bill going to say? You could argue now Bill's a little overexposed. I saw on my YouTube feed algorithm, it pumped me out his podcast, which is Matt Patricia, who looks like he's lost about 40 pounds, and Mike Lombardi. And they just bullshit about football for like 45 minutes. Now, Lombardi will let it fly. The other two guys are talking like, yeah, we plan on coming back into the league. They're very guarded. It's honestly not very good because Belichick doesn't really say anything. But I can find Bill Belichick every Monday with Pat McAfee. Like, he's kind of everywhere. So the scarcity of him is not what it once would have been. And I just think that you got to give ESPN credit for giving Aikman, who got more money than Joe, all that coin, because it's made their main broadcast the thing you want to watch. So when the Eagles play the Falcons on Monday night, it won't cross my head to change to Peyton and Eli, even though I would pay to sit down with those two guys and watch some football and have some beers. But when it comes to my consumption habits and what I'm going to watch, like I'm just not watching them anymore. And I think I read today that the ratings from last year, which are like historic highs, are up 12%. And obviously I work in this business, so when I talk to people, it comes up a lot. But I played golf this morning with a couple guys. One guy was from Texas. He runs TPC San Antonio. Another guy's from Missouri, runs the course out here, the waste management course. And it's crazy how much football we end up talking. One guy's a big Chiefs fan, knows their whole roster, had opinions on trades. The other guy's obviously a big Cowboys fan, giving me his opinions on Dak Prescott, their letdowns in the playoffs. And I think football has just become kind of like a universal language for guys. Like, you don't meet that many people, whether you go to a party, whether you go to a happy hour, whether you're in the office shooting the shit, whether you're on a golf course meeting some new people, where football probably isn't going to come up if people like sports. And when I was a kid, if you're my age or older, America's pastime was always considered baseball. And I don't even think it's debatable anymore. America's pastime is now football. And it feels like the gap between everything else and that sport is only going to widen as we go on. Like, let's face it, the slate last week wasn't that good. I'm looking at the slate this week. It's not great. But I don't know if there's any place I'd rather be. I don't know if there's any place most of people that I associate or that listen to this podcast or just casual sports fans would rather be than on a Sunday with the NFL on in the background, whether your team's playing or not. And the thing football, I think, has really separated from everyone else. Like, baseball is a very localized sport. If you like, pick a team, the St. Louis Cardinals, you'll watch their games, but you're not watching other games. Basketball has really become that. You watch your team, not really much else until the playoffs. Football is the one sport where if you don't give a shit about the Bills or the Dolphins, let's just say you're a Seattle Seahawks fan, you're watching that game. If you don't care at all about the Bears Texans, guess what's on Sunday night at your house? That game. Eagles Falcons. And that's where football has you, is you will watch other teams. And this is what we talk a lot about with college football. The ladder that is pumping these players in, that they have to stay in college for years. Like, when I was a kid, college basketball was so big because all the NBA players were in college for minimum a couple years. Like, Allen Iverson was there for multiple years. Like what Steph Curry did 15 years ago, being at Davidson for several years, that doesn't happen anymore. All these guys are one and done. They don't even feel connected to their program. It's diminished the product because you don't get to build up stars. But like, I'm really excited this week to see the rookie quarterbacks again. Like, does Bo Nix just get his ass kicked by the Steelers? What does Caleb do if Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze aren't able to play against the Houston Texans? Does he bounce back from last week? Jaden Daniels, like, is he just good enough to beat a shitty Giants team? Well, I wouldn't care if they were just kind of random people that I didn't know about. I've been following Caleb's career for 3+ years. I've been hearing about Bo Nix since he started as a freshman against Oregon in a primetime Saturday game that was on ABC. I think Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler called the game. Jaden Daniels just won the Heisman. He's a multi-year starter at LSU. So it's like the college football is exploding. Hate them or love them, like, Colorado's got 2 elite NFL prospects that we have talked about, Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, now for years. So when next year happens and both those 2 guys are on different teams, you will have a built-in history with both of the guys. I saw so many opinions like Marvin Harrison. How do you only get 1 catch? Because we've been freaking talking about Marvin Harrison for years. Separate even from his dad, just him as a player. And that's cool. Like I feel very, very lucky to be involved in this, of the explosion of the interest. Even if the games suck. I mean, that's the crazy part. It's like, yeah, Sunday morning slate's not great. I'm gonna have multiple TVs with 4 boxes on, keeping eyes on all of them. And I'd be doing that whether I did this for a living or not. So the NFL, man, is just rolling.